Canceling my wedding after my fiancé cheated on me with the guy she told me she hates. Am I the bad guy? So, this is quite a long and sad story that I need to vent, as is really hard for me to deal with so far. I, 24M, recently proposed to my now ex-fiancé, 23F, after 2 years of dating. We met by mutual friends at work. We started talking as friends, we went on dates, and on New Year's Eve, we officially started dating. During the beginning of our relationship, she mentions this guy, Marvin. According to her, Marvin has always had a crush on her, and during the first months of our relationship, he texted her several times asking her to leave me and give him a chance. So he used to say how pathetic this guy was and how she despises him for suggesting she would leave me for him. I must clarify, I'm nothing special. I'm a 5 Asian nerdy guy. Time goes by, and after 2 years on dating, I decided to propose to her. So on New Year's Eve, I gave her the ring, and she said yes in front of her whole family. I have some money saved, she doesn't work, so I started looking for venues, catering, invitations, decor, and everything. I spent a high amount of money, as her parents are not in the position to help with the expenses, and I have enough savings to go through this comfortably. One day, while we're running errands, we started talking about having a threesome. We are in our 20s, so there's a lot of things we want to try. So we discussed for a while how we could find someone, and she quickly says, I have someone on mind. I asked who, and replies with Marvin. I know that was the first red flag, but I let it pass. I asked why and she just answered she was attracted to him. I asked about why she would say she hate him first, and then choose him as her first option, and she replies it's only a one-time thing. That afternoon, we were having a nap, and while she was sleeping, I went through her phone, and I found how she was cheating on me with him for a couple months now. They have been meeting while I was working, and she even sent them one of those $M tests you can find online to see if his preferences matched with hers. To say I was furious is an understatement. She woke up while I was checking the phone and I confronted her. She started crying, saying she was sorry and how she didn't know what she was doing. I packed my things and stormed out to stay at a hotel. That night I got a call from her parents saying how I was ruining the engagement and acting as a baby while I was the one who bring the topic of the threesome, and how her daughter wasn't at fault. I hung up without saying anything and started canceled everything I had for the wedding. She called me the next day apologizing and asking me to come back. Her whole family is sending texts asking me to man up as I was the one at fault and not breaking the engagement. Ada for canceling everything.
Next story.
I broke my husband's golf clubs after he left me alone with our newborn twins. Am I wrong for feeling this angry at him, or am I justified in wanting more support from him right now? I, 28F, recently gave birth to our twin babies, a boy, Oliver, and a girl, Lily. They're almost 9 weeks old now, and while I'm overjoyed to be a mom, I've never felt more physically and emotionally drained in my life. I suffered from postpartum hemorrhage right after delivery and lost so much blood that I had to be rushed into emergency surgery. I nearly died. I was in the hospital for almost 2 weeks recovering. The physical recovery has been brutal, but the emotional toll is even worse, and I feel like I'm drowning every single day. My husband, Matt, 32M, was helpful while I was recovering in the hospital, but once we got home, he checked out. He works a 9-to-5 job, but instead of helping when he's home, he escapes to his man cave to play video games or go out with friends. And I'm left alone to care for the twins, and the exhaustion has become unbearable. And I've been having terrible complications from the hemorrhage, constant pain, weakness, and anxiety. I still can't walk properly without getting dizzy, and breastfeeding has been a nightmare. Lily struggles to latch, which leads to bleeding nipples, and every feeding session feels like torture. I've tried to ask Matt for help, but every time I do, he brushes me off. His go-to excuse is that I'm on maternity leave, and this is what moms do. He says he needs to decompress after work, and that I should be grateful he's working to provide for us. Meanwhile, I'm lucky if I get 30 minutes of sleep in between feedings, and I'm running on pure adrenaline at this point. Last week, after another exhausting day with no help, I tried to talk to him about how I felt like I was drowning. His response: he asked when we were going to start having intimacy again. He said, "It's been 2 months, and I'm getting frustrated." I was speechless. My body hasn't even fully healed from the traumatic birth, and he was acting like I was depriving him. When I tried to explain how much pain I was still in, both physically and emotionally, he rolled his eyes and said, "Other women bounce back after having babies. It's not that hard. You've got to stop using it as an excuse." I felt so ashamed in that moment, like I wasn't good enough, wasn't recovering fast enough, wasn't being enough for him. It's not like I didn't want to be intimate with him again. I missed the closeness we used to have, but I was still bleeding occasionally, and I could barely walk without wincing. My whole body felt like it was failing me, and instead of being patient or supportive, Matt acted like I was deliberately withholding intimacy from him. He even tried to initiate once when I was barely 5 weeks postpartum, and I had to practically beg him to stop because it was too painful. He got frustrated, said, "Come on, it's been long enough," and huffed off like a teenager. Every time I tried to talk to him about how overwhelming things were, he'd steer the conversation back to when we'd be having intimacy again, like that was the only thing on his mind. This Saturday was my breaking point. The babies had been fussy all night, and I hadn't slept more than an hour in 48 hours. So I was completely exhausted, and with my anemia still making me weak, I could barely stand. The incision from my surgery was throbbing with pain. Matt had left early that morning for a full day of golf with his buddies, despite knowing how rough my night had been. He said he'd be back by noon, but noon came and went, and he was still out. He was golfing at a course that was only an hour away, so I figured if things got too bad, he'd come home. Around 4 p.m., I was trying to feed Oliver while Lily was crying. My hands were shaking from sheer exhaustion, and in that moment, I almost dropped Oliver. I caught him just in time, but it scared me so badly that I collapsed on the floor in tears. I texted Matt, begging him to come home, telling him I was scared and overwhelmed. His response? Just put them in their cribs and rest. I'll be home later. Later turned into 9 p.m., by which time I was a complete mess. I had been alone with the twins all day, with no help, no food, and no sleep. When Matt finally walked through the door, he didn't seem to care at all. He saw me sitting on the floor with the twins still crying and giggled. Yes, giggled. He looked down at me, smiling like it was all some kind of joke, and said, "You're being overdramatic. You should have just handled it." I saw red. His smug, dismissive little giggle was the final straw. In a blind rage, I grabbed his beloved golf clubs, the ones he's obsessed with, and smashed them against the floor. I broke 2 of them before Matt even realized what was happening. He started screaming at me, calling me crazy and psycho for breaking something so expensive and accusing me of losing it. After that, he stormed out of the house and spent the night at a friend's place. Sid's best friend has since been texting me, calling me a psycho and unhinged for destroying his clubs. He told me I owe Matt a huge apology for overreacting, and that he's been trying his best. But has he? I'm here, day after day, struggling to keep it together with 2 newborns while still recovering from a traumatic birth. And I've been so weak that I've nearly dropped my baby, and Matt hasn't been around to help. He works during the week, and I understand that, but every weekend he's out golfing or with his buddies. And whenever he comes back from work, he is either watching sports or playing online games.
Next story.
I told my friend I'm sorry her parents don't love her as much as mine do. Was I being honest or just cruel? I, 22F, have a friend named Amy, 22F, who I met in college. Currently, we are in our last semester of college. I live alone, but she shares her apartment with 2 other people. We never really spoke about our finances much, but I know that both of our parents currently pay our rent. I told her that I'm probably going to get a job and do my master's at the same time so that I can save up a little, but also to finally have my own money to spend on some things that I love and to travel. She laughed at me and asked me what kind of salary I expect while working part-time to be able to afford all that. I shrugged and said I didn't have any expenses that I'd need to cover, really, just food, and that's it. She looked shocked and asked me about rent and stuff, and I said my parents will be paying for it. She then went on a rant about becoming an adult, how she can't wait to be independent, how she doesn't want to take money from her parents and stuff like that. For the most part, one tried to nod my head and listen to her. But then she said something like I'd feel like a bad daughter if I were you, and that really made me feel embarrassed. My parents want to pay for my apartment, they can easily afford it, and I'm not the type of person to be ungrateful for it. I spend a lot of time with them. I know they don't lack money for anything. They travel, own their house, have a good retirement plan. They don't mind paying for me, and I don't mind taking it. We have a good relationship. I know this won't be forever, and I don't expect it to be. Just a few years until I finish my degree and get a higher paying job. I got annoyed and told her to drop it. We can talk about something else, but she continued talking about how her parents want her to be a real adult, how I'll never want to be ambitious unless I struggle, and just more and more nonsense. Not sure how important it is, but between the 2 of us, my grades are significantly better, and I'm a few exams ahead of her in terms of passing this semester. And I just cut her off and said, well, I don't know. Maybe my parents love me more than yours love you, so they want to pay. I'm sorry for that. Can we now talk about something else? So we didn't talk since, and I do feel bad, because I know that love has nothing to do with money, and looking back, it's such a rude thing to say. But I just said it to shut up, because she was insulting me and calling me spoiled for no reason. I wasn't even the one to start this conversation, nor did I probe into her finances.